Have you ever wondered how brown bread is made? This humble loaf graces our tables every day, yet its creation remains a mystery to many. Brown bread, with its hearty flavor and health benefits, has become a staple in households worldwide. Rich in fiber and essential nutrients, it's no surprise that it's a favorite among the health-conscious. But how does this wholesome goodness come to be? What magic transforms simple ingredients into this beloved food? Today, we're going to unravel the mystery behind making brown bread. So, what do we need to make brown bread? First and foremost, we require whole wheat flour. This is the backbone of our brown bread, giving it its characteristic hearty texture and rich, nutty flavor. Whole wheat flour is made by grinding the entire wheat kernel, including the bran, germ, and endosperm. This not only imparts a darker color to our bread, but also increases its nutritional value. Next, we have yeast. Yeast is a microscopic fungus that's responsible for making our bread rise. It does this by feeding on the sugars in the dough and releasing carbon dioxide. This creates bubbles in the dough, resulting in a light and airy bread. Then we need salt. Salt not only enhances the flavor of our bread, but also strengthens the gluten structure, making the bread more elastic and less prone to crumbling. Sugar is another vital component. It provides food for the yeast, helping it to work its magic. While sugar sweetens the bread slightly, its primary role here is not for taste, but for the yeast fermentation process. And last but not least, we need water. Water combines with the flour to form the dough. It hydrates the yeast, helping it to activate, and also dissolves the salt and sugar. Now that we have our ingredients ready, it's time to start the bread making process. The first step in making brown bread is preparing the dough. This is where the magic truly begins. The process might seem simple, but it's the heart of bread making, a dance of elements that combine to create something utterly delicious. To start, we'll combine the dry ingredients: the flour, the yeast, the salt, and the sugar. The flour is the foundation, providing structure and substance. The yeast is the life force, the microscopic fungi that will fill our bread with airy pockets of goodness. The salt enhances flavor and controls yeast activity, while the sugar feeds the yeast, fueling its work. Next, we'll add the liquids, water and oil. The water activates the yeast and hydrates the flour, while the oil enriches the dough, making it tender and moist. We'll mix these together until they're just combined. Don't rush this step. Take your time. Patience is a baker's best friend. Once we have a shaggy mass of dough, it's time to knead. Kneading is more than just mixing. It's a process of development, of building strength and structure. As we knead, we're aligning the proteins in the flour to form gluten, a network of strands that will trap the gases produced by the yeast, allowing the bread to rise. Kneading requires both strength and gentleness, a push and pull that stretches the dough without tearing it. It's a rhythm, a meditation, a connection to centuries of bakers before us. And it's a test of intuition, knowing when the dough has been kneaded enough. When it's smooth, elastic, and springs back when poked, we know it's ready. But remember, bread making is not an exact science. It's a craft, an art, a process that changes with the weather, the ingredients, and the hands that make it. So don't be disheartened if your dough doesn't turn out perfect the first time. Practice, learn, and enjoy the journey. Once your dough is well kneaded, it's time for the next step. Let's move on to the rising phase, where our dough will transform from a dense mass into a light, airy loaf. The next step is something that requires a bit of patience, the rising phase. This stage is all about giving our dough the time and space it needs to transform into the fluffy, appetizing bread we all adore. Let's delve a little deeper into the art and science of dough rising. This process, also known as proofing, is where yeast works its magic. The yeast consumes the sugars in the dough, releasing carbon dioxide gas. This gas gets trapped in the dough, causing it to expand and rise. It's like a culinary magic show happening right in front of our eyes. But how do we ensure we are giving our dough the best conditions for rising? Well, the dough needs a warm, cozy environment. A spot in your kitchen away from drafts, around room temperature, is typically perfect. Too hot, and the yeast will work too quickly. Too cold, and it'll slow down. We're looking for that Goldilocks just right zone. Covering the dough is also vital during this phase. A clean, damp kitchen towel works wonders. It keeps the dough from drying out while also allowing it to breathe. Plastic wrap can also be used, but ensure there are a few holes poked in it to allow for that necessary airflow. Patience, my friends, is the name of the game here. Rushing this phase can result in bread that's dense and heavy, rather than light and fluffy. Depending on the recipe and the conditions, the rising phase can take anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. What we're looking for is for the dough to have doubled in size. This is a surefire sign that our yeast has been hard at work and our dough is ready for the next phase. So as we wrap up our discussion on the rising phase, remember the 3 P's: patience, protection, and the perfect temperature. With these in mind, you're well on your way to mastering the art of bread making. After the dough has doubled in size, we move on to the next step. Now, it's time to shape and bake our bread. Shaping the dough is an art, a skill that you hone with practice. It's not just about getting the dough into the pan. It's about creating a loaf that will rise evenly, developing a fine crumb structure and a beautifully rounded top. So how do we shape our dough into a loaf? First, we need to deflate the dough gently by releasing the gases built up during the rising phase. Then we pat it into a rectangle about the width of our loaf pan. The dough is rolled tightly from one end to the other, creating tension on the surface. This tension helps the bread to rise upwards rather than sideways, giving us that classic loaf shape. Once shaped, the dough is nestled into a greased loaf pan seam side down. It's then covered with a damp cloth, allowing it to rest and rise again until it's just above the rim of the pan. This is often called the proofing stage. Now, we're ready to bake. Baking bread is a science. The heat of the oven transforms the risen dough into a loaf of bread. The ideal temperature for baking brown bread is about 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Not too hot, not too cold, just right to ensure our bread bakes evenly and develops a lovely golden brown crust. The baking process takes about 30 to 40 minutes, but don't be tempted to pull the bread out too early. Patience is key. The bread is done when it's risen, golden, and sounds hollow when tapped on the bottom. Remember, every oven is different. You might need to adjust the baking time slightly based on your oven's quirks. And there you have it. We've shaped and baked our dough into a delicious loaf of brown bread. The smell of freshly baked bread wafting through the house is simply irresistible. After baking, there's just one more step before you can enjoy your brown bread. The last step is cooling, and then, the best part, eating. After the rigors of shaping and baking, our brown bread deserves a rest. Cooling is an integral part of the bread-making process that often gets overlooked, but it's as essential as any other step. Now you may wonder, why should we wait when the tantalizing aroma is making our stomachs growl with anticipation? Well, it's because the cooling process allows the bread to finish its cooking from the residual heat. It also gives the crumb structure time to set. Cutting into a loaf that's fresh out of the oven might result in a gummy, unappetizing texture. So as difficult as it may be, we must let our loaf cool on a wire rack for at least an hour. This patience will reward us with a bread that's perfect in texture and taste. Now, once our brown bread has cooled, it's time for the grand finale, savoring the fruits of our labor. There are countless ways to enjoy this wholesome goodness. One of the simplest yet most satisfying ways is to slice the bread, slather it with butter, and let it melt into the warm, soft crumb. Pure bliss. But why stop there? Brown bread makes for fantastic sandwiches. The nutty flavor and hearty texture play well with a variety of fillings. From classics like ham and cheese to more adventurous combinations like brie and cranberry, the possibilities are endless. And let's not forget about toasts. A slice of brown bread toasted to golden perfection, topped with avocado or cream cheese, or even a sunny-side-up egg, will surely elevate your breakfast game. Brown bread is also a wonderful accompaniment to soups and stews. Its robust flavor and sturdy structure make it perfect for sopping up all those delicious juices. So whether it's for breakfast, lunch, dinner, or a snack in between, brown bread is versatile, wholesome, and downright delicious. And there you have it. That's how brown bread is made. So, to recap the process of making brown bread, we start with gathering our ingredients. Then, we move on to preparing the dough, combining our ingredients thoroughly. Once the dough is ready, We let it rise, allowing it to double in size. After the rising phase, it's time for shaping and baking, transforming our dough into a beautifully browned loaf. Finally, we let it cool before enjoying the delicious homemade brown bread. And that's it! Now you know how to make brown bread. Enjoy the process and the delicious result.